began with a dream, a reverie. I was grappling in my life with what does it mean to be really free? So I decided to play a little game with myself. Okay, Helena, pretend you're free. Imagine the whole world is yours. Go, do anyway, anything. Slowly, words bubbled up into my consciousness, and I heard St. Louis, Missouri. Of all the glorious places on this planet, I get St. Louis, Missouri. I love the ocean, and Missouri's some landlocked place, and the only thing I know about St. Louis, it has this golden arch. Next, up bubbles an image, and I see myself running through the gateway arch at St. Louis. I'm looking for more freedom in my life, and the best I can do is run through half a McDonald's line. In a little bit, the light bulb goes off. My grandfather's name is Luigi Code. In Italian, that's Louis of the Saints, St. Louis. Now, I believe stories are alive, and they call us to them. Is that you, Papa Luigi? Is there something I'm supposed to unravel here? What's the story? I've always been reluctant, reticent to talk about Papa Luigi. But whenever I think of him, I often remember an old photograph we had in the family. Always intrigued me. It was taken in 1913, and in it, Papa is standing there with a big flouncy tie among a small group of men, women, and children at what looks like a Sunday gathering in East Park, Worcester, Massachusetts. I was young when I found the picture. Asked my mother about it. We don't talk about this very much in the family. This is a group of anarchists, and Papa was one of them. See that man there? That's Bartolomeo Vanzetti. When he would come to Worcester, sometimes he stayed with Nana. A few years later, he and another anarchist, Nicola Sacco, were arrested for robbery and murder. A lot of people believed they were innocent, but they were really arrested for their beliefs and for being immigrants. People from all over the world, some important people, tried to save them, but in the end they were executed. I was 8. I heard the words. Recently, I'm with a group of people I just met and happened to mention this 1913 photograph I had of Papa with Vanzetti. Turns out I'm talking to a historian who tells me his special area of focus is the Sacco and Vanzetti case, and that currently he's looking into the year Vanzetti spent in Worcester, the year he very well may have been radicalized, 1913. What are the chances? Okay, Papa, the call's getting louder. Then the historian says, it's your moral imperative to find that picture. Okay? Now I feel I have to tell the stories. At that point, I become exquisitely aware that there may not be enough time yet to ask my mother about the old days. She's 97 in St. Patrick's nursing home. Until 90, her memory was pretty intact, but these last few years have taken their toll. People, events, times cascade into one another. I think she knows it. I think still. But on that day, it was amazing. She was clear, and once again, a little girl at her father's knee. I used to love his ideas. My sisters and brother always wanted to go out and play, but I loved to be in the little room with him where he would read Dante and Zola, listen to Verdi, and tell me all about them. But when I grew older, I saw how different he was. I got upset. I wanted him to be like the other fathers who went to church. She saw me taking notes. What are you doing? Are you writing this down? Are you going to tell anybody? Who are you going to tell? 97, when dementia wreaks havoc with her memory, when she may or may not remember her husband and children, still the fear is palpable. And she lets me know this is not a story to be told out loud. Now, as an aside, I don't know why I should have been so surprised that the fear is still palpable. My mother, like all the women in our family, spent their lives worshiping at the temple of fear. As kids, none of us could ride bikes. Bikes go on the street, you die. Not just streets, heights, water. You go for a swim, you're going to sink. Climb, fall, die. If you leave the house, they're going to attack you. If you stay home, they're going to break in and attack you. Everything's dangerous. The only relatively safe thing to do was, I think, lying down and resting. I think the idea is that when there's no motion, you're okay. Because, see, things are more likely to happen when there's motion. So if you're not moving, you're okay. Except the other side of that is if you're not moving, you could already be dead. So, back at that day at St. Patrick's, I tried to tell Mom, you don't have to be afraid anymore. That was a long time ago. We can talk about Papa. She looked at me. It's okay now. Really? And I had to think. I don't know if it's really okay. Even now. So now, to tell or not to tell. Papa Luigi. My memories of him are scattered. I remember how he looked. A trim, elegant man. Not clothes elegant, but in his presence, elegant. Full mustache, with lively twinkling eyes, and dark wavy hair that hardly braided through his 70s, 80s, 90s. Papa was 99, 3 months short of his 100th birthday when he died. I remember a gentleman. Papa used to love to fish, but he wouldn't use a bait or a hook. He didn't want to hurt the fish. The beauty of a fishing is not in catching the fish. Oh, and I remember that time he was in Miami Beach. He must have been about 90. Some punks knocked him down, stole maybe $5 he had in his wallet. Why they gotta knock me down? If somebody asks me for money, I give it to them. Why they knock me down? I remember the family compound I grew up in Worcester, Massachusetts, where 3-decker houses sprouted up everywhere at the turn of the last century. There was our 3-decker with Nana on the first floor, Auntie Jo on the second. We lived on the third. Uncle Libro lived in the little house next to the 3-decker, and Auntie Bina moved to the second floor of her mother-in-law's house across the street, and everybody cried when Auntie Artie moved away. 1 mile down the road. I remember the family was in such a hurry to assimilate, to become American as soon as possible. The chant was, "Don't speak Italian to the kids." Only Papa resisted. He said Italian was la più bella lingua del mondo. And he didn't want to ruinare la bocca, ruin his mouth. Parlando italiano è come si canta. Speaking Italian is like singing. Actually, the family was happy that Papa spoke hardly any English. That way, he wouldn't be able to understand all those things he was saying. Papa liked simple things, food, fresh, healthy, not those thick Sunday gravies with the brajoles and meatballs and something pork thrown in to give it an even richer, deeper flavor. No. Papa, simple muddy kind of sauces with tomatoes that literally leaped from the garden into the pan. I remember watching Papa, intently watching him as he would impeccably prepare one of his favorite dishes, arancia sotto l'acqua. Literally oranges underwater. How bland, but I would be transformed as he impeccably peeled an orange, sliced it into rounds, lay it on a platter, and sprinkle water and no one else. And then he would eat. But he wasn't just eating. It was something else. 50 years later, I'm in a restaurant in Sicily with a group of people, and we were served blood oranges, served in exquisitely flavored water. With the first bite, the sensation was such that I had an epiphany. Papa, now I understand the difference between the name of something and the essence of the thing itself. Orange. Orange. I remember Papa's little room, the same one my mother had sat in with him. This seemed to be the place that held the secret of what made Papa different. There were stacks of Italian newspapers and books in Italian, among them his treasured volume of Dante Alighieri's, and I could almost hear Papa's voice as he would proclaim, La Divina Commedia. The cellar was where Papa engaged in his craft, woodmaking craft. He was an artisan, so he was known as Master Luigi. I remember the stacks of wood, tools, saws that he used to make benches and chests and bureaus and chairs for his children and grandchildren. And of course, there were endless jars of canned tomatoes that made sure we would have that summery, sunny taste all the time. Papa covered very little. He loved his cigars. The cheaper the better, all those Panatellas and Coronas. You could buy Papa no better gift than those cigars. We tried. Papa, here's a new sweater. I'm a gutter sweater. Papa wore all the same clothes all the time. Clean, Nana Marianina made sure of that, but people would say, Master Luigi, why don't you buy some new clothes? You wear the same thing all the time. You could look better. Now, our Italian community at that time was fairly contained, so Papa said, it's me, Luigi. Why I gotta change? Why? I gotta make a show. Everybody here knows me. One day, people must have went to visit the big city, Boston. And who should they see coming toward it the other way on Washington Street? None other than Master Luigi dressed in the same clothes. Master Luigi, you're in the big city. Now, what are you doing dressed like that? It's me, Luigi. Why I gotta change? Well, I gotta make a show. Nobody here knows me. Some of these stories I remember, some my mother told. One time she said, you always wanted me to tell you the family stories when you were young. And I would tell them, but I added more, and I always made them nice. Wait a minute, stop, on the side here. What do we know about the stories we hear? Memories are not facts. I have mine, my mother has hers. Now, she tells me, she added to them, made them nice. On top of that, I'm hearing these stories, filtering them through my 8, 12, 25, 40, 60-year-old mind. And on top of that, she's telling the same stories at different ages and sensibilities in her life. So, what's the story? Papa Luigi was born in Vicenza, provincia di Bari, in Italia, 1871. The firstborn son of Maria and Pasquale de Santis, followed by 2 brothers, Emanuele and Armando. The brothers always said they had a beautiful family. He brought us places, brought us things. He spent the time with us. When Luigi was 19 in 1898, he went into the Italian Navy, reluctantly, we were told, and came back filled with all anarchist ideas that had been sweeping Italy in the last half of the 1800s. Now, another aside. What I've come to learn about anarchism is that it is not, as so often thought, all about social chaos and disorganization, every man for himself. Central to anarchism is the belief that social cooperation and organization are natural. That people are essentially good and can be corrupted by the very institutions they create. There's a belief in individual freedom and the rejection of any authority, individual, church, state, corporation that seeks to dominate and exploit. Anarchism believes that if we can truly create an egalitarian society without extremes of wealth and power, join hands across boundaries to cooperate, work, and play, then there'd be no need for police forces and prisons, armies of war, the underlying causes of it. So that was the kind of philosophy that Papa was developing all through his 20s. He would say, per il potere, la ammazza l'umanità. Power, they will destroy humanity. When didn't have a single lira to his name at the time, so Maria Nina had to pay for the honeymoon hotel. They had a loan because Maria Nina's family was eyeing some other man for her, and she had no more of that. Now, this is one story that got changed as it grew. It seemed that Nana and Papa really didn't get married. They didn't. You see, Papa believed in the institution of marriage. At that time, the wife had to promise to obey the husband. What? He owns her? That's not freedom. You don't own anybody. But social stigma of living in sin was a little much for Maria, and she wanted to get married. I got caught in that tension, that creative tension between his ideals and what would be practical given the prevailing social mores. So he relented and went to get a license. But he was adamant he would not go into the church. Neighbors finally convinced him to let the priest into the house. As the story goes, the priest whispered to her, I believe like you, let's please Miami. But never wanted to admit he'd been married by a priest. He was always church no. Christ, church no. When I was 8 and ready to receive First Communion, I asked my mother, why doesn't God let me priests in the church? He believes they don't tell the people the truth. He believes that the priests, like the politicians, will lie to the people to keep them ignorant so that they can have more control over them. When I grew up, I wanted to check out the churches for myself. I would go and I'd come back and say they were good, or we would argue. But he never stopped us from believing what we wanted to. And a generation later, we kids would sometimes dare to talk about we could get a fire going. All we had to do was mention church. Papa, church is good. Church no good. Papa, when you go by the church, you bow your head like this. He says, no, I go like this. Soon after they were married, Luigi and Maria Nina came to this country. My mother conceived there, was born here in 1910. Followed by 3 sisters and a brother. Now, there's a certain pattern to naming children in Italian families. Firstborn son after the paternal grandfather, secondborn son after maternal grandfather, firstborn daughter, paternal grandmother, secondborn daughter after maternal grandmother. And you keep doing that. When you run out and start naming them after aunts and uncles, you don't need to get any of this. It's only interesting if you've ever noticed why in Italian families so many first cousins have the same name. A bunch of Marias, Dominics, Angelos, Angelinas. Papa kept to this pattern to begin with. My mother, named after Luigi's mother, Maria. Second-born daughter, named after Maria Nina's mother, Giuseppina. That's Josephine, my Auntie Jo. But when the third daughter comes in 1913, Papa begins to select names more reflective of his stance in life. Now, nature is a wonder, never to be taken for granted. Like the sun, every morning a new miracle rises. Que bella cosa, Nayuna di sole. And so third daughter becomes Alba, dawn, in the diminutive Albina, my auntie. It's now 1917, fourth daughter comes. Papa goes further out. We always called her Auntie Artie for short because her name was Artea, A-R-T-E-A, or so we thought. It seems that the name Papa actually gave her had no R in it. It was A-T-E-A, translation, atheist. Now, the family had to do something with that name to not make it be what it was, so they slipped in a little R, and they wrote A-R-T-E-A. The funny thing is, when they spoke her name, you see, we're from Massachusetts, and we don't pronounce R's that come after names. Part the con, so before they changed her name, she was Auntie Artie. After they changed her name, she was Auntie Artie. Now she got a nice name. Fifth born child, 1919, the long-awaited son, my Uncle Lee. We always laughed as kids because his name translates as Uncle Book, or so we thought. This is the story we heard later. When my uncle was born, my grandfather wrote proudly to his father, "Now I have a son, and I have given him your name, Pasquale De Santis." Well, Pasquale De Santis wrote back and said, "This is a new time. Why give him such an old-fashioned name? Give him a new name." So Papa dashed off to City Hall to change the baby's name. Came back home, announced to Marianina, "The baby's new name is Libero Sono." Translation, "I am free." Again, it's 1919, you can't show your stripes, so they had to do something with the name. But this time, instead of putting a letter in, they put one out. When you take the E out of Libero, you get Libro. So now, instead of Uncle I am free, I have a more acceptable Uncle Book. Papa's fellow compatriots were of a similar inclination when it came to naming their children. There was another I am free in that community. And two of my mother's best friends were Orda and Idea, now an idea. And I can imagine maybe when those families got together for Sunday gatherings in the park, and it was time to call the children, might have sounded something like, "Okay, kids, come on, time to eat. Hey, get over here. I am free. 8 is done now. I did the other. I am free. Get over here now." But those years, 1910 to 1920, were difficult ones for immigrant families. Children were growing, and it became harder and harder to make ends meet. Now, there's always been a question about Papa's relationship to work. He'd have to work a few days here, have a job there, but nothing reliable and consistent. We'd hear things in the family like, "Well, you know, Papa never busted his hump." Or, "He's always down in the cellar, futzing around, making picture frames." He used to yell at him to get off the couch, and he'd say, "Go away, leave me alone, I got nails in my head." And what we know Papa loved to do was converse intensely with like-minded friends. Smoke those cigars, read a book, listen to the opera. People would say, "Master Luigi, you do nicer work. Why don't you work a little more, make something, sell, make some money?" And then what I'm going to do? Well, then you will bring some people in and work with you, work for you, start the business. And then what I'm going to do? You keep growing the business, it gets so big you really make money. And then what I'm going to do? Then when you make enough money, you sell the business. Take it easy, do whatever you want to do. You're telling me I gotta stop doing what I'm doing now, so I can end up doing what I'm doing now? But Papa did have a particular attitude to work. He would say, "Bisogna lavorare, a piacere." It's important to work, a piacere, as it pleases you, as you will, as the creative juices flow. So Papa wasn't against working, per se, but for a certain quality of working. My mother said she was 5 when they were building the Trident. And, oh, it was so wonderful. Carlo Cosmai did all the big construction, but Papa made all those railings and those beautiful slats of wood that he put up on all 3 floors. I love to watch the way he moved. Papa moved slowly, measured, as if his body was speaking. Whatever needs to get it done, will it get done in its own way. Another aside, let's be fair. There are 5 children to feed and clothe. Sometimes it's, "What do you mean, a piacere? Gotta get the food on the table and now." There was Grandma Marianina. She was scary. All the kids in the neighborhood afraid of Marianina. Her house, her yard, impeccable. You could do this anywhere at Marianina's house. Immaculate. Well, one time the mischievous son-in-law, my Uncle Vito, created havoc in the family when he scooped up some outside dirt and went like this to Marianina's doorstep. What's that? Long story short, Marianina worked hard inside the house and took jobs outside the house sometimes to make sure the food got on the table. She was the pragmatist to Papa's visionary, and DeSantis' family life was forged in the creative tension between those two. There's something else to consider when we look at those years, 1910 to 1920. All across this country, there were increasing numbers of riots, agitation, strikes to protest horrific working conditions. There was violence on both sides. Anarchist bombings, attempted bombings, unprovoked attacks upon striking workers. Right here, Ludlow, Colorado, unprovoked massacre of striking miners. Massachusetts textile mill strike, where women marching along the streets with their children were clubbed down by the police. Strikes close by, Plymouth, Hopedale. It was a time of spreading hysteria. The Red Scare, hundreds of radicals captured, deportations, false accusations of murder. In that climate, known anarchists were routinely blackballed. It was the company's way of managing it. One day, Papa went to look for work in Worcester, big manufacturing town, shouldn't be so difficult. He didn't come home at night. He was, where is he? What could be going on? What's going on? The unspoken questions were, did anybody see him? Were the police there? Was he speaking? So happened someone in the family was walking up Elm Street where the old library used to be. Through the glass windows, they see Papa sitting there at one of those tables. He'd spent the day reading. No job. So the question remains, just plain lazy or what? My mother was 10 in 1920 when Sacco and Vanzetti were indicted for robbery and murder. She said, until then, I used to love it when my father spoke. His voice would go right through me. I absorbed his ideas. I stuck up for him, and I wanted to be one of the anarchisti too. We would go to the parade and I'd sing, Viva l'anarchia e la libertà. I was young and innocent. As she got older, she told me she became more afraid. I hated when he went with that crowd so much. I was afraid sometimes he was more for them than for us. He wasn't as faithful to the cause as those other men. Oh, he was faithful, but he wasn't a leader. Maybe he liked to listen to the speeches, made some remarks. I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if he was arrested and I really was too young to grasp it. By the time she was 15 or 16, she really told me. I told him not to wear that big flouncy tie anymore. That was a signal you were an anarchist. People were getting arrested just for wearing the tie. And then there's that man in Chicago who didn't take his hat off when they played the Star Spangled Banner, and they shot him and the people cheered. I was afraid one night they would be hanging at the door. My mother was 17 when Sacco and Vanzetti, when worldwide efforts to save them failed. And what are the chances this week is the 80th anniversary? On August 23rd, 1927, Sacco and Vanzetti were executed. Miss St. Vincent Millay wrote, "Justice denied in Massachusetts." In that whole time, something else was happening in the DeSantis household. More lovely daughters were blossoming, and the boys began to notice. Now, we know Papa believed in freedom. Amour, love, natural and free, consensual, no domination, no exploitation. But for the DeSantis daughters, first, you got engaged, then you went out on a date, chaperoned by two sisters. As for Papa himself, he loved. It's something I haven't told you about the cellar. There were piles of nudist colony magazines. I learned recently from Cousin Frank that Papa actually introduced his grandsons to his collection. Nudity was art, natural, and therefore beautiful in all its forms. He would say, see, she's a beautiful, he's a beautiful, she's a beautiful, and you're beautiful, all beautiful. Papa even commissioned his eldest grandson, my cousin Jim, to operate the projector he couldn't manage, so together they watched the nudist colony movies. And Papa did make art out of those magazine cutouts he had of beautiful nudes. Well, he had to put them in all those picture frames he had hanging on the side. In his later years, Papa would go to Florida, even after our grandmother, Maria Nina, died. He outlived her by about 35 years. One winter, word came back that he was seeing a certain Canadian woman. In the spring, he invited this Adrian to come for a visit to Worcester. Now, she spoke French, very little English. He spoke Italian, very little English. He probably had a few words in common. Papa sent his sons-in-law, Uncle Vic and Angelo, along with one of her cousins, to pick up Adrian at the Greyhound bus terminal. When they got there, they saw this fashionable, dressed, elegant, staring, cigarette holder in hand, puffing away. No way. He rode around the block again looking for someone else. Second time around, she's still only one standing. Can't be. They rode around a third time. Finally, they sent Louis out to check. Are you Adrian by any chance? Okay. There was such a furor among Luigi's children. I could let Tomasi come into my house. How does it look? To have an 85-year-old father consorting with some strange woman. And anyway, if they can't talk to each other, what do they do when they're together? Only my mother welcomed Adrian to her home for dinner. And dared to ask this lovely woman, what do you see in my father? He is a true gentleman. He takes me to the symphonies and to the opera. He is a man of culture. We understand each other without speaking. It seems there were others besides Adrian. We only found out years and years later when we were having a DeSantis cousins get together. Excuse me. And we began to reminisce about Papa. Cousin Karen said, I was at a large holiday party, and I heard some stranger talking about a really elderly gentleman, a Master Luigi, who built quite a reputation with the women in Florida, and had even invited his brother Emmanuel to join him in his adventures. I went up to him and I said, you're talking about my grandfather. Who are you and how do you know this? My father's been dead for 12 years by this time. Then Karen says that she was Papa's translator scribe for letters coming back and forth from Adrian in Canada. That was my secret with Papa. My other cousin Louis said, that was my secret with Papa. But her name wasn't Adrian. And she lived in Barbados. I got you all beat, said Cousin Jim. I went to visit Papa in Florida one winter. He told me not to tell anyone. I went to pick him up in the convertible I was driving. I figured nice grandfather-grandson drive. And he was with a woman. I opened the door to let him in, and he stopped. No. You put the top down. We go in the back. I said, Papa, it's going to be too cold with the top down. No, l'aria fresca, fresh air. You put the top down. We go in the back. How do you think I felt? I'm the chauffeur. Well, my grandfather is hugging and kissing some woman in the backseat of an open convertible. I was 25. He was 85. He wanted to be young. And he was. In 1974, when Papa was 95 years old, he wrote to his grandson and namesake, Louis DeSantis, on vacation. Carissimi sposi, dearest unions, viva l'amore, sempre amore, amore. He wished them a son, Luigino quattro generazione, and then he wrote, così il mondo si sta cambiando e avremo più libertà. This way, the world will keep changing, and we will have. Years went by, Papa spoke less and less of his ideas, though from time to time he'd make a remark or shake his head at injustice or closed-mindedness. Papa lived a long, simple life, guided by his ideals, but ever mindful of the times in which he lived, free and practical. So, now where am I in this story? Still present to my mother's don't tell. One day, I found some ragged pieces of paper upon which Papa had written lists and lists of names. Some were obvious: Michelangelo, Da Vinci, Toscanini, Verdi, Dante, Tolstoy, Pirandello, Ugo, Marconi, Meucci, Fermi, Darwin, Einstein. He'd written names of socialists, libertarians, and anarchists. Some I knew, some I had to look up: Marx, Engels, Lenin, Bakunin, Cartier, Tresca, Galliani. He'd written Cristo, San Francesco, Thomas Jefferson, Eleanor Roosevelt, Abraham. Reading all those names was fine. It wasn't until I looked up some names of 16th century unorthodox thinkers. It said martyrs to the cause of free thought, like Campanella in prison 27 years, or Giordano Bruno burned at the stake, that something happened in my life. I felt the fear take a gripping hold. You know, sometimes you just don't get it until you get it, like the orange. I always knew people get killed for speaking freely, but in that moment, it became for me what it must have been for my mother at the time of Sacco and Vanzetti. Visceral and immediate. People get killed. Martyrs to the cause of free thought. Is that what happened to Sacco and Vanzetti? Is that what my family actually thought could happen to our Papa Luigi? And how many other families lived in that kind of terror? How many still do? And you know, fear like that spreads miasmically, so it becomes not just fear for your physical safety, but how about fear that you'll be rejected just for being different, for having beliefs outside the mainstream? How about the fear that who you are and what you believe will be reduced to some label, and maybe a misunderstood one at that? In my grandfather's case, Italian, or anarchist, which was the same word as bomb thrower or dangerous radical. Yes, there were those who were violent, who were radical, but that's not the whole story. There is a difference between what was done in the name of anarchism and anarchism itself. How about the fear that you'll be thought foolish or dismissed as naive, Pollyannish, because what you really want to say is so simple. You are beautiful. It's about love. We're not bullying each other, not taking advantage. It's about our laughing and crying together in this life. About having work and play be as one. Isn't it something how powerful stuff like those fears get passed down through the generations? All this time, my reluctance to talk about Papa, his philosophy, his way of being in the world, has been about my mother's fear trapping me. Time to unravel the fear. Time to use its fierce energy to step into courage. Time to step out of that old program and into greater degrees of freedom. All through my teen years, I used to have a recurring dream, really a nightmare. In it, Papa was the gatekeeper for our compound, and every morning he would raise this arch-like gate so that all the grandchildren could run through and play. At the end of the day, he'd raise it again, and we'd all run back. But each time, before I could get back, Papa would slam the arch down, and I would be stuck outside. Why, Papa? Why won't you let me in? Why won't you let me come home? I knew he loved me, but I could never understand that dream. Then I grew up and forgot it. Now, as I recall my St. Louis reverie, and I see myself running through that arch, I realize that that nightmare has become a guiding vision. I see Papa's smiling face. Stay out, Simone. You don't have to run home so soon. Go, be free to speak. Yes, I know home isn't nice and safe, but also too tight. Coraggio, non mi frega. Remember, courage means to speak your mind with all your heart. Some people will like, some people no like. Go tell the story, go. What's the story? You free, whatever story you want. Go, tell. Mom? I just told the story, and it is really okay. Thank you, Papa. Ti amo.